Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming bright and early on Saturday. I know after the first day of PAX, it can be a little difficult to get yourself up in the morning, so we appreciate it. Welcome to Pieces to Pixels, the Art of Adaptation. This is a panel that I've actually wanted to put together for quite a while. We at Handelabra have been making digital tabletop games for more than 5 years now, and it's something that we love to do. And we often get lots of different questions about it, and we don't always have like a centralized place to answer those questions. So I wanted to get people together that we've worked with, some people we haven't worked with, but who are working in the same space, and really just sort of dig into this topic of like what and why would you take a tabletop game, make it digital, and what are some of the challenges that are involved with it. Good friend of mine, Chris, over here from Camp is going to run the panel, so I'm going to turn it over to him. Thanks for coming.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Pieces of Pixels panel, the Art of Adaptation. My name's Christian Matines. I'm from Camp Gaming. We're a Twitch partner, board game, tabletop streamer. We've been working with a lot of these guys, doing a lot of their titles, which they're going to introduce. If you're not familiar, it's pretty crazy. Now that in the digital age, a lot of this stuff's on your phones, it's on Steam, it's on Switch. It's readily available to everyone. You don't have a big box game coming anymore. That big box game is now in your pocket, so that's pretty cool. Today, we're going to be talking about that adaptation, and I just want to start with the panel introducing themselves, talk about some of the projects you've worked on, and then we'll move ahead to the panel, starting with you, Jeremy.
Right, so I'm Jeremy Handel. I'm the co-founder and president of Handelabra Games. We've made games like Sentinels of the Multiverse, Bottom of the Ninth, Anzen, One Deck Dungeon, and currently Spirit Island.
Hey, I'm Jennifer. I'm a developer for Handelabra Games. I work with Jeremy.
Hi, I'm Bree. I'm the art director for North Star Games, and we make Evolution, the digital game.
My name is Christopher Bedell. I am the co-owner of Greater Than Games, and Jeremy just claimed that he makes Sentinels of the Multiverse of Spirit Island, but I make Sentinels of the Multiverse of Spirit Island. And then Jeremy makes a digital version that sells more copies than my physical version does. So I am the designer of Sentinels of the Multiverse, the lead developer of Spirit Island, and a whole bunch of other games. And this is Adam.
Hi, I'm Adam Robertaro. I'm with him. I helped design Sentinels of the Multiverse initially, and then I did all the illustration for it.
Hey, I'm Daryl Lauder, game designer. Did Compounded, Bottom of the Ninth, Fate of the Elder Gods, and I'm also a graphic designer for Greater Than Games.
Great, thanks, guys. Yeah, so I just want to kick it off by saying, let's start this off. So now the tabletop games are becoming more and more digital. Early on in the design process with you all, we'll start with you, Christopher. Starting and maybe even Daryl as well. Early on in the digital or the physical process of designing a game, how early in that process are you even starting to think about digital nowadays?
If at all.
Thank you for. I was gonna throw myself under the bus. Thank you for wheeling the bus around for me. Not soon enough, according to Handelabra. When Handelabra first came to me to talk about Sentinels of the Multiverse as a digital game, I said to them, "Good luck. This is not designed for this. It's going to be very challenging, and I don't think you can do it." And then they did it anyway, but several times in the process, they were like, "But what about this?" I'm like, "Well, I did warn you." I remember a time at a convention 2 or 3 years ago where Jean-Marc, one of the programmers for Handelabra, found me carrying a prototype of a game that I was working on. He's like, can I just see one of the decks in there? And he looks at me and says, Right. This card, don't do it. Change it. Make it something else. We can't do this on a computer. Do something else. I'm like, okay, I can do that. I can change a card. And so nowadays, when I'm making things, I try to be much more aware of like, if this game takes off, if this game does well, it is likely that somebody's going to want to make a digital version. I should probably be kinder to those people. But it's not like, the way I design is very, like, the things that come to me are the things that I put into the game and I make it work. And then as I'm doing development, I'm like, oh, right, so this is someone else's problem too. So it's not in the design process so much as in development is the short answer to that long answer.
Daryl, do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, Jeremy's going to throw something at me. When I design games, I don't at all think or care about digital versions. Ultimately,
Jeremy's like, yeah, we know.
Yeah. Ultimately, though, I am happy when it does go digital, but when I'm designing it, I'm not like thinking, oh, if this goes digital, then, like Christopher's example, like this card can't work this way. To me, the digital version of any game, it's like, cool, we don't have to worry about setup, we don't have to worry about shuffling, we don't have to worry about rolling dice, like it's all like right there, it's less mess, it's just in and out. And a digital version should play like the board game version, but maybe in 2/3 or half the time, just because of the setup and you're losing all the fiddliness because it's all right there. But yeah, that's
Well, ultimately, it makes me think that, just designing a physical board game takes a lot of time in general.
Yeah.
We know that. With Unplugged, for instance.
yeah.
You go to
oh
those.
yeah, I run Unplugged. I forgot to say.
Yeah, and he does Unplugged. But early in the implementation, that could be years of design process for physical.
Mhm.
Now, with everything, basically it feels like everything's going digital. We've got so many companies implementing the games now to all platforms, right? It seems like even the big publishing companies are designing their digital spin-off.
Right.
You're seeing that more and more. Like,
Well, yeah, and I'll jump in here to say as well, like, I actually, you think I'm going to throw something at you. I don't actually mind that you don't plan. I prefer that you don't. I think part of what the art of adaptation is finding games that will adapt well, not forcing games that won't adapt well
Right.
to adapt well.
Right.
And that's a lot of what we look at. We look at things like sales figures on the tabletop and other kinds of things, but we also look at, like, will this game be improved in any way by going digital or not? 'Cause
Right,
if not,
right.
why do it?
and what opportunities do you find?
Well,
That digital will provide that physical game.
Yeah, so Sentinels I think is a great example because there's so one of the things that people do sometimes complain is that it's fiddly. There's a lot to keep track of on the tabletop. It's not hard to do,
Right.
but it.
I'm going to interrupt you. Has anybody here not heard of Sentinels: The Multiverse? So we keep saying the word Sentinels. Okay, cool. Sentinels: The Multiverse is a cooperative superhero card game in which 3 to 5 players play as heroes fighting against a villain in an ever-changing environment. It's the first game that I designed. It's the first game that Greater Than Games made, and Jeremy was one of the first people to play it publicly because you played it at PAX West 2011,
yeah.
and we'd released at Gen Con 2011, and then they pestered me for years. But it translates really well to digital. It has a bunch of challenges. It's very challenging because there's a bunch of interactions that all have to be programmed into the code, and Jean-Marc yell at me a lot, and it's great. We're good friends. But it translates really well because the thing that you're doing at the table is putting a bunch of modular pieces together and then playing the game that is the resultant part of those pieces, and having a game just do all that for you. We're like, oh, I want to play these characters against this villain in this environment, and the game just does it all. Feels really good, and there's a bunch of great touches from you guys and from stuff that Adam has redrawn and things for it to make the video game feel even more like a comic book experience than anything you can reasonably do on a tabletop experience. So anyway,
Yeah, but we've actually had games that have come to us and said, hey, we'd love to do a digital version, and we looked at it and we were like, there might be a team that can make this better. We're not that team, so sorry, but we've turned down projects.
That's good awareness on your part.
What's that?
I said it's good awareness on your part,
Yeah.
rather than usually going, yeah, we could do this, and then drop the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the digital world, we see so much that's done with the art of these games. And I'll start with you, Bree. When I'm talking about opportunities within the digital realm of taking a tabletop game to the digital world, what opportunities do you see presented to you as an artist over there?
There's a ton of opportunity. So one of the things that we identified early on with Evolution when we were deciding what we wanted to do with the visual look and feel of it, if you're not familiar with it, it's a strategy adaptation survival board game, and you have these species and you're playing evolutionary traits on them, and it's really beautiful, and there's a lot of great watercolor art. But what we thought is that it felt kind of static. When you look at the art, it's really pretty, but it doesn't make you think that it's alive enough. And we identified that in the digital game that we could really start animating these animals and making them into 3D creatures that come out into the scene. And the flat watering hole board, we made it into a 3D watering hole with rippling water, and there was a really great opportunity there to take the board game and make it a lot more exciting, I guess.
Immersive?
Yeah, immersive. And there's also there's a lot of opportunity with accessibility. So we managed to make the game, I guess, a lot better for people who have visual impairment or color blindness or physical impairment. So we really focused on where we wanted to place buttons on the screen so that somebody playing with one hand could easily flick their cards out into the game or tap menu buttons. We ended up doing icons that aren't actually in the physical game to help people who are colorblind, because in the physical game there's colors that identify different cards based on their category, whether they're defensive or attack or whatever. But it's not easy to go back and change a physical game and keep reprinting new copies of updates. But with the digital game, you can update it anytime you want, really.
So you have lots of opportunities to grow on user experience.
Yeah.
The
yeah,
immersion,
definitely.
the user experience, the flashy, the everything to grab your attention, and lots of that. Jennifer, would you like to elaborate more on that, what you've done with Handelabra?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things you can do in digital that wouldn't make sense in physical. Like for Sentinels, for example, like you can have a lot of cards on the table. So we actually made like a whole like iconography language for small cards to make it like easier to like quickly figure out like which cards do what things.
Adam, yes. When it came to a game like Bottom of the Ninth, and you're doing stuff like that with Handelabra, what did you find really helped when it came to dice rolling?
So I didn't actually work on Mount.
Oh, no, sorry. No, sorry, not Daryl. I was looking at Daryl and saying
But
I'm sorry.
So, sorry, say it one more time because I got to just take it away.
I was just interested with what Maria and Jennifer were saying there. I mean, with Bottom of the Ninth and the pieces, I mean, it just made me think about the dice rolling, the meatballs, that kind of thing. I know there's a lot of animation that was done in that game.
Yeah.
How did you take advantage of that in that product?
I didn't. Jeremy kept showing me like, "Hey, look, this is what we're gonna do," and "Hey, look, this is what." I was like, "Okay, cool." Like I was, he'll tell you, I was hands off. I was just like, "Cool." He came to me with questions, I'd answer them, and that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think Jennifer. That
I
was,
animated the
yeah,
meeples,
the 3D
yeah.
meeples was your idea. I think.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, that was probably my favorite project I ever worked on.
That was like the first thing he showed me. He's like, "We're gonna do Bottom of the Ninth thing." I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And he's like, "And look what we want to do." And he showed me the meeple swinging a bat, and I was like, "Yup, do that."
So Jeremy, it was a business opportunity, I mean, that helped you sell this title. I mean, I know when we found out about Bottom of the Ninth, it was through someone named Dan Patrice and his podcast, Geek All Stars podcast, if you're not familiar with that. And I tried this game out. I'm a baseball fan. I did that whole thing. But seeing the digital implementation of it, I was able to expose more people to that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I would say that is one of the business decisions that was probably not one of our best because we spent a lot more budget on that game that we probably didn't need to, but I thought it looked cool and I really wanted to do it.
Well, and we had. I mean, all right. So this was the first and currently only digital implementation of a board game I have out, but we had ideas of grandeur with it launching. It was like, oh, we'll make custom like exclusive players, and you can put your picture on a card, and we had all these ideas that we wanted to do, and yeah,
Not enough.
indie game, indie company,
Yeah.
indie digital game. Oh, it's still indie.
But there's so much more of that happening today, right?
Yeah.
And with indie games in general. Adam, I'll go to you, and we're kind of go back to Sentinels. I mean, that's a good point. There's so much flash and so much awesome stuff happening with so many cards. I mean, like breed references and what Jennifer's referencing in terms of. I mean, if you haven't played Sentinels and you lay that out on a table, there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
And as a casual player, I'm sort of having to ingest this in the user experience. What did you feel the digital adaptation of the game, within the art and the design of what's included in that product, really helped people take that game on even more? Like Christopher said earlier, you said you sold more copies because of that.
Yeah. So for me, one of the things when you're playing the physical version of the game is you sort of end up making, feeling like you're making a comic book page. Like each of the cards ends up as kind of a panel, and they're out, and you're telling a story together through that. And with the digital version, we could make that a little more literal. Everything could be placed into an actual page and arranged like panels, and I think that made it. It makes a big difference with immersion. To go back to that, there's a lot of visual shortcuts that you can use in a digital thing that you can't force people to position where they put their cards on a table. You can't sit at the table with them and go like, oh no, but if you do this, like look at those two arts go together.
But you can do it in the digital.
But you can do that in the digital.
Right. Well, I want to actually speak to that. The one thing that when we were working with Handelabra, and the thing that Adam specifically did that exists in the digital game that doesn't exist in the tabletop game is Adam did a bunch of unique arts of each character, of each hero and each villain that are in the video game, and that like over time they take damage as you lose hit points. The visual representation of it takes damage, and that's a cool thing to see your character changing as the game is going on. And you have that when you're playing the physical game in terms of, oh yeah, in my mind's eye my character's doing this thing, but having it on the screen of like, oh look, here's this art showing the thing that I would imagine. That's cool. That's great. So.
When I say this also I think speaks to some of how we do our adaptation process. There's actually a phrase in game design which I was unfamiliar with called the core fantasy, which we sort of apply to how we do our games, which is, with Sentinels, the core fantasy was, this is a comic book, you're in a comic book. So any decision that was like, does this make it feel more or less like a comic book? If it was more, we would lean into it. If it was less, it was like, we probably don't need this. With Bottom of the Ninth, it was, you're at the ballpark. What can make you feel like you're at the ballpark? And seeing the meeples actually swinging and running around, to me, felt like that really sells that you're at the ballpark. It's not just you're looking at this map that looks like a diamond and you're rolling dice over. We wanted it to really feel like you were in that place. So.
I mean, along with so many opportunities, we have to look at the other side of the sword too. I'll throw this to whoever wants to take it first. What is some of the biggest challenge you've seen taking that physical game and bringing it to the digital world?
So recently, just because it's super recent, so there was a company that was working on another one of my games for digital, and really excited, jumped in to help them out because I learned a little bit from working with Jeremy, I should be a little bit more hands-on, or not hands-on, but involved. Not that I was surprised by anything. Jeremy was awesome to work with. The whole team was. But, and by work with, it's like, I'm just going to check Slack. Okay, there's no fires, whatever. But so this company, they did implementation of the game, and then they proceeded to change everything about the game to where...
Except for the name.
Except for the name. That was literally the only thing. And then I had to fight them to at least use the logo, because they're like, oh, the fans of the board game will love the... And I'm like, but no one knows by looking at this that it's the same damn thing. Like, come on, guys.
How did that crowdfunding campaign do, Daryl?
So,
Okay.
There's only one digital game I have out.
So to speak to that, so the studio that was working on this game, because I've been kind of adjacent to this process, just kind of watching, going, had these grand ideas of making a brand new video game inspired vaguely by the board game.
Yeah, it was an interesting idea. It was a very interesting idea, but it's
very
like
ambitious.
It's like when you read a book and then you go see the movie and you're like, the ending was different, that character didn't exist, they never went to this place. It was very much that. Cool, you did this immersive thing, but it's not anything to do with the board game that you took. So
I think they were trying to find an audience. They were trying to make a video game that's like, this is a video game, and it'll find its own audience, and fans of the board game will like it, but it's beyond that. But as a result, they ended up not finding an audience and alienating anybody that liked the board game.
yes, totally,
So
absolutely. 100%.
that wasn't the right way to do an implementation, I guess.
I think that there's potentially room for that once you have a large player base.
Yeah, if you have a large player base, and also or an IP that's established to a point where you're
Right.
like, oh, people want something in that IP. Like we're actually doing a video game right now with Underbite Studios, who are sharing a booth adjacent there with Handelabra in the main hall. That they are making a video game called Sentinels of Freedom that is a video game about the Sentinels characters. So it's the same characters for Sentinels Multiverse, but it's not a board game. It couldn't be a board game. It's truly uniquely a video game based in that same world, based on the same property.
Yeah, and I would never try to call a game inspired by an IP by the name of the board game.
Yeah.
So actually, Bree, I wanted to ask you, since we're talking a lot about there's a board game company and a video game company and we're working together, since all your stuff sort of happens in-house, I wonder if there's differences in terms of, you're sort of hearing us talking back and forth, if there's a difference in that, your experience of the adaptation process.
I think my difference in experience is that, the head of North Star Games and the designer of Evolution, Dom, he wanted to develop in-house because he's very particular about exactly how he wants this game to be. He didn't want a situation where he hired an outside company to design the digital game and then it ended up being not exactly how he wanted it. We did that with Wits and Wagers. You can't get the app anymore because he was so unhappy with it that he didn't even want it represented digitally. And so after that experience of having the game not be to his standards, he was like, well, we just want to do it in-house. But that comes with its own set of challenges because we didn't have any development studio before and nobody in our board game company had any experience making video games. So it was first of all, it was expensive. It's expensive to, to start up a brand new division of your company. It takes a lot of time because everybody has to get ramped up. And I feel like with another studio that has more experience, like you guys, where you're taking on multiple different contracts, It's one of those things where you already have your team built, you have systems in place, like maybe you have back-end systems or multiplayer systems that you've built that you can apply to other games. We had to build everything from scratch. So if I were to rewind the clock and start again on this project, probably hire an outside company to do it.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was really, really hard, and I think it set us back time-wise as far as a release. Like, if we had hired another company to do it, we probably would have put the digital version of Evolution out maybe a year earlier.
Yeah, it's similar to the way that I feel about people asking me about, like, okay, you started a board game company, it's gone really well, what are your tips for doing so? And they're like, well, we started a board game company in 2011, and I recommend starting in 2011 or earlier. If I were to do it now, if I were to come up with the idea that we were to make Sentinels now, just the way that we did it in 2010 when we made it for ourselves, and then we were like, oh, we could make a company. Nope, I'm going to sell it to somebody else. I'm not going to do that. It's the industry. Like right now, and I know we're getting away from digital games here, but right now on Kickstarter, is anybody here not familiar with Kickstarter? Okay, great. On Kickstarter, there's more than 500 games that get launched every month on Kickstarter. So how do you get noticed? Like there's so many games that come out all the time.
Well, the thing is just piggybacking on what you're saying. Like a game like Sentinels now wouldn't go.
A game like Sentinels now has competition that exists because of Sentinels. So,
but no. Even if it wasn't for that,
right.
like nowadays, there's so many games coming out digitally as well. I'm sure you guys can run into this, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. But physically, in the cardboard Dead Tree world, the game's gone from it has to be good to be published to it has to be great to be published. And the bar keeps going up because there's more. I think there's 17,000 UPCs or something that was made this year.
Well, and I could say that when we released Sentinels originally, the version that we released originally was not very good in terms of production quality. Like I think the game was still very good, but we learned a lot between that version and the version that you can buy in stores now.
And I think this is a good thing because, like Daryl's saying, the bar has gone from you have to be good to you have to be great. Awesome, great. Let's get more awesome games out there, more great games instead of just good games. But it's harder.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's absolutely the same on digital right now. The indie. One of the reasons why we do adaptation instead of original game development is from a marketing point of view. We understood that finding games that already have a fan base are going to be easier to sell than games, and we know this because we made a game and it flopped. It was called Uncle Slam. It was President on President Boxing. We showed it off at PAX West, which is how we met them.
It was great. I remember because we called us and we were like, check it out. And they had a giant, really cool booth with lights and
So
chairs.
elaborate.
And they were like, come over and play our game. We're like, okay, cool. Yeah, I could be a president and punch another president. Like, do you want to see our game? Like, oh, yes. And then that's what we played the rest of the show.
Can you release that now? Like re-release it?
Yeah, so there's a glut out there of good to great content. That's the thing, is it's not just that, they talk about shovelware on a lot of, these sort of platforms, and there was a lot of shovelware, but a lot of these platforms have gotten the shovelware out, and there's just so much good stuff. It's hard. It's hard to be just good or even good to great because getting noticed is increasingly difficult.
Yep.
Well, I think that goes with saying, like, you've got even coming to consoles now with Switch and everything like that. How do you, I'm just piggybacking on more of what you're saying there, when choosing titles and making something shine in this very full pool, how do you choose a title that, I know people are bringing older titles back out. How do you make that shine over the new titles? Or how do you make a new title shine over a popular, well-known title? On, say, the Switch, how are you going to get your product down?
If I could answer that, if I could tell you, like this, then like
how do you choose a title?
How do you pick what game is going to catch the attention of everybody?
We would be
you just
so
do your
rich if we
best.
could do that.
You make some guesses and you do some market research and you make a game and you put it out there and you go, gosh, I hope people like this. And sometimes they do, and frequently they don't.
Yeah.
And that's marketing. So I had this big conversation with John of Laywaste Games recently, where he was like, how do I explain to people what it is that I do and like the volatile nature of the game industry? And I was like, the tabletop game industry, and including the digital side of it, is a niche within a very large industry. And we're a niche within the gaming industry, but that's a niche within the entertainment industry. We all work in the entertainment industry, and that's terrifying. Like, games are luxury goods. We all like playing games, but games are not the things they were in the 80s and 90s where you could try to get like as many games you can for as cheaply as possible. Now it's like, no, they don't blink at dropping $90 on a big box board game. Sure, no problem. But as a result, how do you get attention from people that are going to buy your game and play it? Like, people that play a lot of games have a giant stack of games. They're like, oh yeah, I'll get to that eventually. So how do I pick a game that is going to go into the Switch market, where the Switch market has tons of new games coming out all the time, and it's going to get any sort of notice? Like Jeremy said, if it has some sort of recognition from beforehand, that helps, which means that a lot of the games that are going well, that are being successful now, are based on IPs, which isn't bad, but it does limit people that are creating something new from getting noticed.
Well, and I will say this too, we get contacted a lot by companies that are like, hey, my game is great, it's going up on Kickstarter next month, let's talk about having a stretch goal for a digital version. And unless it was literally like greater than games, like I write back, I'm like, thank you very much, we have very specific numbers of copies sold through to consumer, that is the minimum before we'll even discuss anything. Just because we know now from having done, a number of games and knowing how many copies are in the wild of those and how well they then perform digitally, we've got a decent metric for sort of figuring out, like, is this going to be sustainable enough? Because, that's the same thing that you guys have on your side of the spectrum as well, which is this might kickstart really well and the first print run might sell out in a minute, but if we print it again, is it going to keep selling?
Right,
And you never
know
know.
it has legs.
Right.
Yeah.
How many, of the number of titles we put out in the last 10 years, how many of them are evergreen products?
Right.
And the answer is, like, essentially 3.5 of them. And that's tough. So.
Yeah, 'cause we have dozens of games, and only not even a quarter of them are evergreen titles. Yeah.
What about, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to jump on asking questions here, but I'm going to ask a question. I know. So there is a big swing lately with AR, like Pokemon Go, the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, and now the same company is about to do Catan.
Catan, yeah.
Which you're going to get hit doing the longest road. But, so what is there interest to jump into that pool, like to do a AR Sentinels or to do an AR Evolution, something that you could I could totally see, like, this point has to be a feeding ground or a watering hole or an evolution point and all that, and then Sentinels, it's like you're working together, go find Baron Von Blade or his base or something to take stuff down. Like, is there any interest to get into that, or is that just too big where you're like, nope? Because clearly, I know your company.
We kind of did that. We actually prototyped an AR game of Happy Salmon.
Real nice.
Yeah, we did. And
Nice. That's awesome.
just to see, like, what it would be like, and it would, we decided we weren't going to release it. We just wanted to see, like, how could we improve the experience, and I think it's really difficult with board games trying to adapt it for AR. The Happy Salmon game basically is just you just throw down cards. You're making matches, like fist bumps and high fives and everything. And when you make a match, you throw a card down. So with the prototype, we had this thing where you could use your camera over the card, and it would, like, make the little creature spring to life and everything. And I feel like having your device there in the midst of your game and having to use it was almost like an interruption to the experience. And I feel like unless you can sort of just subtly enhance your game, rather than having to, like, whip out your phone and, like, use it to, like, see some kind of icon or some kind of thing happen, it's more of a hindrance, or at least we felt it was for that particular game. But I think the game is Alchemist or whatever, they did a really great job. So with that one, you just use your phone to hover over the card, and then it, like, shows your little alchemy components, like, coming together, and what the resulting mixture is or whatever. And that I thought was really, really cool, because if you don't have that app, you have to do, like, this sort of grid calculation. It's kind of a pain in the butt. So it enhances the game without being, like, clunky.
Yeah.
I feel like if you can do that with AR, that's kind of the way to go. I don't think you want to burden people with having to do that in an inconvenient way.
I think so. We've talked a little bit about potential app integration with some games. We had some ideas for some much larger products that I think would be aided by a companion app of some kind. But I don't think that any, like, sort of geocaching thing like a Pokemon Go is something that we would ever consider doing with board game content. That's just so massive.
So I still have a bee in my bonnet. I'd love to make an AR version of Laser Riders, because I think that could be, like basically the first time I saw like any keynote where they showed like pointing your phone at the table and seeing some world on the table, I was like, oh my god, Laser Riders would be so cool, because the core concept of that game is that the table is whatever table you have in front of you. That's the board you're playing on, and you'd be able to use the AR to do it. So it's something I'd still love to do at some point, but it's just we've got other things going on right now.
Right.
You can only do so much.
I mean, to sort of flow with that, and I'll throw this to you, Jennifer, if you want to jump in on this, would be where do you find, I know we're talking AR, we're kind of talking about VR, where in the space does something like a tabletop simulator fall in with that then? Because you're not a true digital full implementation, where would that fall in for certain titles? Is that a better option for certain titles? Or is a full digital implementation like taking a mod of a game versus a full digital implementation when it comes to adapting a digital title?
So I will say my unpopular opinion to save Jeremy from having to say anything first, because I know he has opinions too, but I'm not going to say what Jeremy's opinions are, just my own. Yeah. I don't care for Tabletop Simulator. I think it's a great tool to be used when I've done playtesting, where I'm like on my playtesting files and have my playtesters be able to play it there, since they live in lots of different places and things. As a game designer, as a game creator, the thing that I am more than anything else is an experience creator. My goal is to make an experience at the table where I have made a game that when you play the game, you feel something. You go through some sort of journey as you play the game. And you're interacting with cards or boards or chits or dice in some way where there's a physical connection there. So when I'm translating this thing, and I would say when I'm translating with someone else, but I'm working closely with them as they're doing so, because the thing that matters to me is that feel still exists, and I've lost my physical component. I've lost my personal, direct human interaction. So there has to be something else that gives me that connection, that makes the game create the feeling that I was shooting for in the first place with the game. And that's an important process of making the digital game. It's not just saying, okay, you have a card, you move it to here, great, so let's make it the digital game, you move the card to there, great, I can do that, I can make a little physics engine and move some cards around. That's insufficient. That is not the same for me. That's not the same experience generation that I'm looking for. And so Tabletop Simulator, I think, is just a one-to-one from the experiences that I've had with it of you take the thing, you move it there, you move your stuff around, but it's cold and lifeless, and it has like weird glitches and buggy things because it's a thing they're moving around. I don't care for the experience that comes out of that. The feelings that I get are not the feelings that I want to get out of a game. So I think it's a fine tool as a platform. When people say, "Oh, I've released this game on Tabletop Simulator," I'm like, "No, I don't know what the feeling you're going for is."
I guess what I was going for there, and I'm going to direct this at you, Jim, because this is what's going to come to you here. When we're talking about as a broadcaster on Twitch, and we have to show a board game, and a lot of the challenges we reach is a real estate issue. And that comes from showing everything to our audience that needs to be seen. When you're at a table with a board game, you can see your cards, you can have your hand of cards, you roll the dice, you see what your opponents are doing if you have player boards. How do you find space within a digital implementation in that real estate to show in a digital game enough of that information?
That is something that's always a kind of a challenge, and we spend a lot of time planning that part of it out. I always do like a lot of mock-ups of what the screen will look like with different types of setups, and almost all of our games, I think we have like small versions of the cards that we make with icons to make it easier. And then another thing in terms of like the difference between, because we do a lot of cooperative games which work really well as solitaire games, and that's one. It's a lot easier in digital, like if it's just one person playing, because you don't have to like set up the whole. It's fun like with your friends sitting around a table like with physical cards, and then in digital it's a lot easier. There's less pieces if it's just one person.
Well, and also cooperatively, a lot of times you don't have to worry quite so much about hidden information.
Right.
If I know what your cards are, that might just help us actually strategize better versus I can't know what your cards are.
I think in Sentinels for the online multiplayer, we actually I think have an option of showing cards or not showing cards.
Anyone else would like to elaborate on that in terms of finding the real estate to show all the information in various times? In some games, I find.
Yeah, with our game, it's a 4-player game.
Yeah.
Actually, it's a 6-player game, but in the digital version, it's 4-player, and we found that it was extremely challenging just even getting 4 players on the screen.
Sure.
4 hands of cards, 4 boards of pieces, it was nuts. And, you know, I think we probably could have scaled it back, like when we first launched the game, maybe just doing a 2-player version first and seeing how that performed. But we were just like, no, we want 4-player, because there really aren't a lot of 4-player digital games. And there's a good reason for that. You know, when you're on your mobile device, you have very limited space on the sides. You know, it's easier to have, on a landscape screen, 1 player on the top and then, you know, your HUD below. So we ended up cramming in 2 players on the side. It worked, but it was so hard to do that. We had to be really careful about how we scaled the pieces, and we sort of dynamically squish or move pieces around on the board based on you know, your screen ratio. So an iPad is 4:3, it's a lot more squished in, and then we have people who are like on ultra wide monitors who are all spread out. So we had to figure out a way to have 4 players, entire boards, fit and move around and shift and dynamically change their position based on your screen ratio. So it was really challenging. I think in the end it was worth it. Having a 4-player digital game is just a ton of fun. It's really cool. I think Evolution as a game plays better with more people. But another thing we had to do was find a way to tuck away information that you don't need. It's one of the sort of principles of UX that is really important, is, you know, just surface the information that's contextual to the specific like phase of the game you're in. You don't need to show everybody everything. You can sort of hide things away and, you know, put them behind little drawers or button menus or, you know, whatever to help clean up the screen space.
Well, I think a lot of these things too speak to, again, the really specific difference between analog and digital, which is fuzzy versus ones and zeros. And, you know, what we found was, you know, like Christopher was talking about, when you've got everything on the table, I can choose what to look at, but it's all there and I get to pick. When you've only got this much space to deal with, we as the developers have to make some decisions about what we show you and how. And I do think that, you know, one of the things that's so interesting, like there were things in Sentinels that got way easier in digital, but there were other things that got way harder because of that particular nature. You know, like, you know, shuffling cards, seeing what's in play, keeping track of ongoing effects, those all became way easier. Things that became way harder, everyone takes 1 damage. You know, like every target in the game takes 1 damage. Now, like on the tabletop, everybody targets in your area, give them 1 damage. Oh, if there's an order issue, let's talk about the order and whatever. On digital, you gotta do 1, then the next, then the next, the next, and you know, you can have 100 targets in play in Sentinels in one case. We did find ways to mitigate that a little bit, but it's still definitely harder in the digital than it was in the tabletop.
Yeah, and I'll also say there's a big difference in terms of screen real estate between developing a game for PC or tablet versus phone. Because I know, like, when we transitioned Sentinel's UI to phone version, we had to like really minimize a lot of pieces.
I didn't think that you were going to be able to do.
Yeah, we were like, oh, they're going to do it for phone. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
And actually, the phone version is my favorite version.
It's really good.
It works. I think it works really well.
Yeah. The journey of Handelabra and Greater Than Games over the years has been like, sure, try it. They're going to fail, and then they don't, and they're like, oh, great.
And now you have the experience when someone does fail.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And it's good though, because it means that now I think, oh, whatever I throw at you, you won't fail. It'll definitely work.
Exactly.
Good.
Always.
Yeah. Great.
That's all we do.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I mean, it sounds to me like it's the digital, the art of adaptation, allowing people to take advantage of exciting opportunities in user experience improvement, mobility, bringing more players into the hobby, bring more players to these physical games that not ever try because they're daunting, and that kind of thing. Bringing people together more. I know with what we do on Crit Camp, my partner, he's in Nashville. I'm in, where I'm at. We have, if you want to touch on it quickly, what's the priority of the online multiplayer experience in these games? Is it a priority?
So, with much consternation, whenever we do a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo or something, people always ask for online multiplayer, and we understand that is a very exciting feature for a lot of people, but we also know from data that something like 85 to 90% of people will never play online. They might not buy it if it doesn't say they can play online, but they're probably not going to play online. So we always sort of de-emphasize it, and unfortunately, that sort of generates some negativity in backers, but our position, we are a sort of a startup, and so we sort of operate on that idea of get the minimum viable product. What is what is going to make the most people the most happy with the least amount of time and effort to make a good product. And then if it does really well, then we can add those other features later. That's what happened with Sentinels. You know, with Sentinels, it was tablets only, then it was Steam. You know, a year later, it came to online, and a year after that, it came to phone. I think that's the right order. Or was it phone first and then online? I don't remember.
It was online first and then phone, and the online, I think, was like a solid 2 years after the game first came out.
Exactly.
And from the beginning, I was like, man, if you can't play this online, I'm not interested. And I was wrong. So you can write that.
You heard it here first, folks.
I never said that. Yeah.
Multiplayer was one of our biggest challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was well, so how you're explaining that you released your multiplayer and you also like went to other platforms later on. One of the things that we decided that we were going to do is we were going to launch fully cross-platform, all platforms compatible, playing in multiplayer, 4-person multiplayer, and built-in chat, and all of these things
From day
all
one.
at once. Yeah, you're looking at me like, wow, you really did that. Yeah, we did that, but it also cost us.
Yeah.
And it cost us in time. So where we couldn't put out an MVP, and we probably should have, we ended up just doing all the features that we wanted and then releasing it as it was. So it was extremely challenging. Multiplayer was stable until it hit the world. It was like, it worked in QA, but it really, yeah, that threw us for a loop, because once we had people on a huge variety of devices and, you know, connecting and dropping from Wi-Fi because they're playing on a train somewhere in Europe, and we're just like, wow, okay, this is a really big problem. So always release in New Zealand first. That is our best tip if you want to launch multiplayer, because you have a really good small market that's a simulation of a larger market, and you know what you release to have tested in QA locally amongst, you know, a few hundred beta testers or even a few thousand beta testers is not even remotely close to what's going to happen in real life. But
Yeah, we ended up doing a separate Steam branch with a public beta of the multiplayer as it was coming out, and it was hugely useful because, as you said, like, it never survives first contact with the enemy.
Yep. In this case, to be clear, Jeremy, the enemy is the customer, right? Is that what you said?
You're saying your customers.
I didn't say that.
Okay, all right. I'm just checking.
You might have said that.
Oh no, I don't remember that.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, that's something I think in this day and age that a lot of people are looking for. That was an interesting point you said there. That's a double-edged sword, right? Helps sell a game, but it can also hurt a game.
Yeah, it's interesting too because, like, I think it was Gen Con last year that, like, the legendary digital version came out. I don't know if you remember this, and it was a disaster. Like, they were a huge company, so they were able to sort of weather it and continue to make it. But if we had launched a game that was as bad as that on day one at Gen Con, we probably wouldn't be a company anymore. Because we would have put so much behind it, and, like, I mean, they had a huge booth that was like as big as this whole center area of chairs, just talking about, I think it was like DXP or something, Legendary DXP, I don't remember what it is, but they couldn't do like Marvel Legendary because they didn't have the digital license or something, so they came up with like a whole new version, but it played just like regular Legendary, and it was terrible. and they fixed it eventually, but, like, we don't have the luxury of putting out something really bad and then being able to fix it. We have to put out something at least good.
I kind of think that in a way that's a bit of a strength of being a small developer is that you have to be 100% sure of your product before you go out with it, and so you know what you're releasing is the best thing that you possibly can release. And so I think that is an asset from our perspective, at least, that we get to focus on and really drill into what makes something good instead of having to fight with like a team of hundreds of people. And
But it is an albatross.
yeah, it is that too. Yeah.
So, as a digital player, I going on the multiplayer kick that everyone's talking about here. To me, someone, and I forget who over the years, but someone brought up that, you know, gameplay is like going to dinner with friends. So, you know, you want it to be memorable, you want it to be good, and you don't want the takeaway to be that was a terrible dinner, or, you know, or just plain blah. So a multiplayer game, to me, is more interesting, even if I don't implement it. If I could do it just local or multiplayer, the whole point is, at some point, the computer's either going to be too stupid where the game's too easy, so why am I going to continue playing it? Versus multiplayer, it's always going to be ranging based on, you know, where in the world. So I have a TV dinner at home by myself, it could be good. Probably it's just going to be that. Or I'm having dinner with all these people, and I could be like, oh my God, Christopher made this dumbest move, but Adam like won from third place, and it becomes a thing. So that's the story. So.
Well, I think that's a lot of time. I think we need to open up the floor to some questions. I'd love to open up the floor if anyone's interested in asking questions. I think there could be some good stuff here. Yeah, we've got the
guy with the mic back there.
So if anyone has any questions, we'll throw him your way. We got here. We got here. Which way's he got?
He's coming over here.
All right, let's go over here.
I'm curious. I'm curious how you guys think about audience, especially when you're translating like an analog property into digital. Do you imagine that audience is like some subset of the overall audience, or is it kind of incremental or completely different than the audience you might be thinking about for the board game? Since a lot of these digital, I think you use the word like video games, like, is it a completely different system or like different experience, maybe like based on the IP of the board game, or do you guys think about it as like a direct translation with the same audience?
That's actually a super interesting question, because we've done a lot of sort of picking at the data that we have in terms of how this works. And I can tell you this much, at least with Sentinels, about half of the people who play it digitally also play it analog. And I don't know what it is from your side, but I do know that we get a lot of feedback from people who are like, I had never heard of this, it was recommended to me, I tried it, I loved it, I went out and bought everything, and now my family plays this every Thanksgiving or something like that. We get that story a lot, and I assume you probably get similar on the video game side.
Yeah, I certainly do. And one of the most notable things that happened to me was about a year. It took about a full year, but about a year after the first version of the video game came out was when somebody at a convention came up to me and said, "Oh yeah, I played the tabletop game. I came to it through the video game." And that was a moment of like, okay, good, great, that it's working, that it's not just, sure, people that have the tabletop game then also buy the video game and they like it. But now it's happening in the other direction. And there's a bunch of people that even, there's a whole bunch of different directions it can go, and I like most of them. One of them that I like is the people who play the tabletop game and ultimately went, oh man, it's a lot of work to play the tabletop game, but I really like playing the game, and so I play the digital game all the time, and I don't play the tabletop game, the physical game anymore, but I play the digital game, and I'm like, great, awesome, you're still playing it, you're still having a good time. It means that a game that you would have shelved and moved on from and stopped playing years ago, you're still playing now because there's the way that is more accessible to you. So awesome, great. But yeah, I know that people come to it through both ways, so
I think early on we were really, at the initial start of the process, we were really worried that we'd be cannibalizing our own audience with it, and that we thought, oh, there's only one audience for this thing, but it's proven to be self-cyclical.
No, an important point that a lot of people. So there's a bunch of different tabletop game companies that go to Jeremy and say, "Hey, make digital versions of the games." And a lot of those people come to me first, and they go, "Okay, Christopher, we've heard of you, and we know you're a pain in the butt to work with," which is true. You like working with Jeremy. So how is that possible? And so that's a whole other discussion. But an important part of that is, okay, so is the digital game stealing from the physical game at all? And no, just the opposite. The physical game sells better because a digital game exists.
And vice versa.
That is a very necessarily true. Anybody's like, well, I don't want to have these competing. They're not competing. They're helping each other out.
Yeah, we found out that we have a new audience that we never would have had before, which is China. We don't have our board game in China at all, but we had a really interesting surge in our audience in China. It started with people making Android hacks of our game. They were stealing it, but then it kind of it grew organically, and then they just started buying our game and paying for it, and we had this massive surge of Chinese players, which just would never have happened without the digital game.
Right.
Is it localized for China?
No, it's not.
That's what's so
Playing in
interesting.
English. Yeah.
Yeah, that's another issue that we've had a lot, which is like, we would love to localize for all these different things, but we're a small company. It's like, do I spend $10,000 localizing for Germany and only get the core game of Sentinels, and then there's all these expansions that would also need to be done, or do we put that $10,000 into bug fixes and Oblivion content?
Or a new game.
Or a new game, right?
Yeah. Like Spirit Island, coming to digital. Plus marketing.
Up for pre-order now.
Wait, you're talking about localizing for Germany. You mean translating everything to
Yeah.
German? So an interesting thing that I found when I was at Essen. We did this board game championship where every country is represented by a team, and so I was on Team Canada. Long story, I'm not Canadian, but at the end they did a survey like how would you want these things updated and all this, because all the players of the teams are sent all the copies of the game that you're playing in the tournament. So like I got like 6 copies of the game games in the mail, and so handing them out to the team so we all play and play and play and play. And the one biggest thing at the end of it was every single country wanted just English versions of everything. They didn't want the foreign language because things could be lost in translation or twisted wrong. Whereas English, everything was like that's the way it is, that's how it's written, and it's done. And so that was like that year for them. That was like the biggest breakthrough of evolving that whole tournament. So now it's like 100% English rules, 100% English game set at that, and that was that.
It's really interesting.
So, and I'm wondering if
German convention.
at a German convention. So I'm wondering if maybe something like that holds true for digital at the end. So.
Hi. So there's a growing number of digital-only board games, digital-only card games. Some of them have mechanics that are just nearly impossible to replicate in real life. With that said, though, do you still think that there would be a market for taking a digital-only board game, digital-only card game like Armello and making it into a physical product?
Well, I've actually done a panel with the guys who did Armello, and they are in the process of working on a physical game. So there you go. I think there is a lot of potential for that. Obviously there are some things you can only do in physical, and they're going to have to work around those difficulties. But vice versa, there are things that you can do in physical that are very difficult to do in digital. So you have to make some compromises. But yeah, I know that they're working on that. They spoke about it at PAX West last year.
It would have to depend on the game, though. Like, there's some games that are probably digital. Like, Hearthstone would never work in physical.
Yeah, Hearthstone.
No, but Hearthstone's an implementation of a card game.
Yeah, the Hearthstone is
Right,
an
but-
adaptation of.
Yeah, there was a WoW TCG that was a long time ago. and
No, it's totally different.
No,
It's the same.
It's the same. They've updated a bunch of little mechanics of it, but it's built on the exact same engine.
I played the Warcraft card game. It was terrible.
You're gonna have to trust us on this.
You're talking to people that played it
But
religiously for
but
a
now
long time.
Hearthstone, though, now has all the randomness
Right,
and the
now
shuffle
it does.
this in and take
Right.
this out. Like,
Because when you take because it's not the game, they didn't say, oh, we're making the World of Warcraft trading card game on digital. We're making Hearthstone, which is based on the same engine and everything has the same starting point. But then we're saying, what can we do with the digital? Oh, we can animate this, cool, great. But also we can have these cards that evolve, and we can have these other different things. So they took steps beyond that. And I would say that something like Armello, going from digital to physical, you're going to have to do a thing like that, where you're saying, okay, what are things that are intrinsically changing? Where this is the same core engine, it's the same core game, but there's things that are necessarily going to be different because of the medium.
yeah, but it's the same way going the other way, too. Going physical
Right.
to digital, there's going to be things that are different.
Yes, but not always. There's not a difference in the gameplay between physical Sentinels of the Multiverse and digital Sentinels of the Multiverse. It's a thing we've worked really hard on.
But there's also the prototype for Sentinels of the Multiverse, the card game,
Oh,
video
right.
game,
Yeah, right.
the board game
Yeah.
that we were going to put out. That's
Yeah.
still in the Handelabra.
That's Handelabra still has that. They're making they are making a board game that is an adaptation of the video game of the card game.
Yeah.
It's really dumb.
It's going to be great. Coming to Kickstarter in 2037.
Nope.
Hi. One of the panelists mentioned how the single-player mode seems to be the most played mode of these digital games. So could you talk about how you actually designed the AI to be competitive and interesting and dynamic, or what other adjectives you as designers and implementers think are important?
I'll go first because it's really easy. We have no AI in our games.
I would disagree with you, Jeremy.
Well, excuse me.
I wrote the
Christopher
AI.
wrote the AI, and we just adapted it. That's the best way.
Right. So that's why I want to talk to hear from you on this, because that's like,
Machine learning.
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, there are, I don't know if you're a developer, but yeah, so there are various machine learning tools that you can license. And, you input basically your rules in it, and you let it play, and it teaches itself, and it gets better over time. And our AI to start with was good. but it wasn't great. But it's actually getting better, and with every update that we put out, our AI gets better. So.
Well, that's terrifying.
Yeah, and actually, I know Roll for the Galaxy and Race for the Galaxy, Temple Gates games, they use machine learning as well to train the AIs in their games.
And their tool is way better than ours. We should have used theirs. Yeah, they're not all created equally, so I would do some research on what machine learning tool you actually end up licensing. Yeah.
But with any sort of cooperative tabletop game, the AI has already been built. So that's why Jeremy really likes making cooperative video games.
Well, and actually, I mean, I was being a bit glib, but the simple truth is that like you could see a scenario where like I play Tachyon and an AI plays Legacy and Bunker. We decided not to do that specifically because Sentinels is so complex that, I mean, I'm sure there's a machine learning algorithm that could probably learn it after a while, but it feels like it would be very hard.
One of the things that was actually really cool that we got to do with ours is we programmed in play styles. So you can play 6 different AI in our game. One that maybe is geared more towards carnivores, one that's geared more towards gathering lots of food or propagating a lot of population. And these 6 different play styles give you a totally different experience. So you're not just playing like one vanilla AI or 3 vanilla AI. And then we put 4 levels of difficulty in there. So if you wanted to, you could play an easy carnivore and an expert level propagandist. So that was one thing that we could do with AI that was really great.
Very cool.
Hello guys, how you guys doing?
Hey, how are you?
I know at least 3 of you guys up there. My question is, what do you guys go out and look for someone else to partner with to make the digital versions, or do the digital people come to you?
For us, for Sentinels, the digital people came to us by nature of we were next to each other at PAX West 2011 and went, but it was actually a longer story than that. At Gen Con 2011, we had sold the digital rights to another company that was like, okay, we want to make a video game. We're like, awesome, great. So we'll do a thing. They gave us $1,000. Ooh, back then that was a ton of money for us as a brand new starting out company. And then we had this contract, but we were clever in the contract. We said, oh, well, if you don't do anything with it in a certain amount of time, then we get the rights back. And they never did. So we got $1,000, sat on the game for a year or two, and then at the end of that point in time, went to Handelabra was like, we want the game. We're like, we can't have it. The rights are in somebody else's hands. And then the thing came around, and they're like, we want the game. I was like, oh, okay, sure. And by that point, we were in a better place to do it. If we had made the game right when we had met them earlier on, it wouldn't have been as good, because we didn't know as much about our own game until it had been in the public eye for a while, and we were able to do new print runs and new editions. And then it just kind of worked out, and Handelabra and Greater Than Games have gotten to kind of simultaneously evolve over the past decade. So that's fun.
Yeah.
Jesus.
What about not Handelabra with Greater Than Games? Like, did that company come to you guys?
Underbite?
Underbite, who's making Sentinels of Freedom, they came to us. They came to me, and they were like, hey, we are making a video game studio, and we hear that you have lots of ideas for lots of games. What is the pie in the sky video game that if you could make anything you would make? And I said, well, here's a couple of ideas, but then there's this one thing that I think is impossible, and it's this. And
This is tactical RPG.
And they're like, oh yeah, we can do that. And I'm like, can you? And here we are years later, and they're like, oh my god, this is so difficult. You're a pain to work with. That's true. And then same thing. They also.
Why was the trend company name bro?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, with us it's about half and half. Obviously we approached them for Sentinels, and then same with Bottom of the Ninth. That was doing well. It was like, hey, this could be a really cool, interesting follow-up. It's in a very different thing. It's competitive versus cooperative. It's, sports versus superheroes. We really wanted to try and sort of branch out there. And then after that, we actually started getting people coming to us. One Deck Dungeon was actually, I think, a bit of a mix. Like, we both were sort of aware of each other, and we kind of just sort of fell into a meeting at Gen Con one year and was like, this could be a really interesting thing. Let's talk about it. And the next several games that we know we're going to be making were also about a mix, it turns out. So, yeah.
I think at this point also, though, that we kind of default to Handelabra in terms of, if we want something made, we say, hey, is this something that you can do? And sometimes they'll say, this is not the right, we're not the right people to do it. And they're very honest with us about that, and I appreciate that.
Because, just like Christopher, we were also clever in writing a contract, which states that they need to ask us first.
Yep.
But as
we're happy about it.
As we said earlier, we know if something's not in our wheelhouse, and we're, if it's not, we make cooperative, strongly mechanical, deep strategic games. Basically, that's what has been successful for us. And so if it's not doesn't fall into that, we'd have to really understand why we were doing it to have to reach outside our comfort zone, really. So.
Great. I think we have one more. We have a quick one right here.
I guess as a follow-up to his question from before about board games that are strictly in the digital field, like Hearthstone or Armello. My question is when do you ever have like ideas where you think that like that is the only way that it would be done, but you still want it to be as a board game?
So a thing that I say a lot when I'm designing games is when I'm designing tabletop games, because I don't, for the most part, design digital games. I design tabletop games and then they get implemented sometimes. But a thing that I say very frequently when I'm designing a tabletop game is like, okay, this works this way, and it could do this if this were a video game. We're like, if this were a video game, this card could then flip from phase 1 to phase 2, and then it could flip from phase 2 to phase 3. But as a physical game, I've not yet invented a card that can have 3 separate flips. So
we have a booklet.
We have a booklet. So as a result, like there are certain things where like I'm aware that if this were a video game, I could do this for this other thing, but it's not a video game. And as much as I have various ideas of things that can become video games, for the instance of Sentinels of Freedom, for the most part, I am a tabletop experience designer. And anytime I have an idea like that, I'm like, that's a cool idea. Put it on a shelf. Walk away. That's not where my strength is. It's not where my passion is.
There have been tons of times though when we've been talking about decks that I'll say, "Oh, it would be really cool if we did this thing."
I'm like, "Yep, if it was a video game,
let's put this whole building security level mechanic in this deck, and that'll be really cool." And yeah, we'll go. This
in a lot of
is
cases in our collaboration, Adam's like, "What about this really cool idea?" And I'm like, calm down. No.
Yeah.
And so it works out. We're a good team.
Yeah, that's like 9/10 of it.
And I think we're done.
We're done. That's time, guys. So I want to thank everyone on the panel. Thank you so much. Thanks for the honor of being able to be up here.
And I would also just mention, you can come see our stuff at booth 2606. Where's your stuff?
Man,
Find the North Star Games booth.
It's nearby.
I think it's 2613. But
okay, there you go.
Don't quote me on that.
We're 2513, so you right next to us, like across the aisle?
They were pretty close, like a couple aisles
I think
down.
they have a sky banner right next to us.
Or
too.
you can also I'll be around here a little bit after if you have questions.
Yeah, I think we can all maybe hang out just outside if anyone
Answer
wants to come up.
questions.
And then where's the unplugged area?
Unpub area is at the other end of the labyrinth that is PAX Unplugged. It's labeled as the collaboratory on your maps if you can find a map.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for coming.